on the bright side, I really liked the specific challenge that Rachel had to do.
I agree. I thought it was a neat challenge. I have become addicted to a game because of it. Some person on Twitter posted about it, and now I've been playing it all week. It's like a sorting game. So I've been playing that all week now.
If you lose it, does your phone get thrown into the ocean?
Yeah, it does. Whenever I am pooping at work. And please cut this out. I'm not going to finish.
I'm leaving it in.
I'm not finishing my sentence.
I'm leaving that in. So whether you want to finish it or not, is up to you.
I was going to say, when I'm playing it while I'm pooping at work, if I don't finish it, my phone gets yanked into the toilet.
There you go. I don't know if that made it better or worse, but it's staying in. Welcome to the Idle Talk podcast. My name's Peyton, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jacob. This week, we are recapping episodes 11 and 12 from Survivor Season 47. If you have not seen these most recent episodes, right now is your spoiler warning. Consider yourself warned. We have a lot to cover, so we're going to dive right into it. We're going to cover episode 11 pretty briefly. Last week, when this episode came out, was Thanksgiving. We decided to take a little break and not record, so there was no episode of us recapping that. So we'll discuss it very briefly, and then I think we're going to spend the bulk of the episode talking about this week's episode, which is episode 12. I don't even know the name of this week's episode. I haven't looked, but it was crazy. We just finished it about 30 minutes ago at the time of recording, and so we have a lot to discuss.
You're going to get our raw, unfiltered opinions because we haven't had time to process anything.
Yeah, if they didn't call it Operation Italy, I think that is a huge missed opportunity.
I'm looking it up on IMDb right now. Operation Italy, yeah.
Yeah, okay. That seems like the obvious name for this episode.
Yeah.
Which means
Andy got another named episode.
Which, if I'm not mistaken, that would make it the 5th consecutive title and the 6th total that he has named this season.
Yeah.
5 in a row, 6 total that Andy's named.
Because he named this one, he named the last one. Yeah.
Yep. So, and last week's was called Flipping the Wind Switch, which is a great, it's a great name and was honestly a pretty cool line. So I'm not mad that he's the one naming them because they're interesting names. It's just so bizarre that they're shamelessly letting him name all the episodes. And so I just don't, at this point, it seems impossible that he's the winner because of how over the top Andy is the main character of this season. That if he were to win, it would be the most obvious winner in Survivor history.
Yeah. And I think we'll talk about how the stuff that happened this episode, I think, is a more catalyst for Andy not winning.
Yeah. I think that this episode has really shaken things up in a way that makes this 2-part finale very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely am happy that they broke it up into 2 parts,
especially
kind of like we've talked about before.
Episode.
Yeah, and that's something that I mentioned before when we talked about this in our last episode about why they could potentially have split it into 2 weeks. I just think there was so much craziness that happened going into this final stretch of the game that they just wanted more time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I'm grateful for it. So without any further ado, let's talk about last week's episode, episode 11, Flipping the Wind Switch. Really, the big takeaway from this episode was Kyle went home and Rachel earned the vote blocker advantage.
Yeah. And I'd personally kind of just like to get your opinion on Rachel getting an advantage because in my personal opinion, I think we are too late in the game to be going on journeys and giving out advantages and making people lose their vote. I think it has less of a consequence on the game in the pre-merge and like when we've just merged. but we're at final 8 now. It feels way too late in the game to be engineering chaos into the game by making someone go on a journey, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, it definitely feels too late. I'll say that. I almost feel like it was production throwing a Hail Mary for Sam and Genevieve because of how outnumbered they were, and it felt uninteresting to just let them go out, like, or I guess at this point, Kyle, Sam, Genevieve, just letting those 3 go out 3 in a row. It almost felt like it was just, we're going to give some sort of an advantage or a potential advantage for these players, and then Rachel ended up being the one to get it. And so I almost think that it was never intended to go to a player in a majority alliance. It seems like it was engineered for one of these players on the bottom, and they were kind of trying to force it in the game to help them, and it was sort of a redistribution of power mechanic. I think, though, regardless, it feels far too late in the game to be for the producers to be injecting themselves in this way. And so I agree. It felt weird that they were, like, the players were even surprised when the boat was rolling up. They were like, now? Like, that seems odd, because an advantage at 8 means a lot more than an advantage when you're in the tribal stage of the game, or
even at like 12
immediately merged. Yeah, it means a lot more, even if it's only good for 3 weeks or 3 tribals. One thing that is interesting about the journey, though, is that at least the advantage feels like it's consequential, but it doesn't feel super duper consequential in the same way of, like, if it was, an idol or something, right? Like, it could be worse. It could be a steal a vote. I think
it's consequential in the sense that Rachel got it and that she already had an idol. And I think because of it, it makes her very, like, her path to Final 4 and Final 5 becomes so much easier.
Yeah, it definitely does. But everyone knows about it. She told everyone. So how much of an advantage
Sam
is it
and
really?
Genevieve.
Well, but they found out now. So it's one of those things where it's like, how much of an advantage is it really if everyone knows about it? They don't know about her idol, though. So we'll see next week, because I think that's where we're really going to find out as we're approaching the Final 5 deadline to use all these advantages.
Yeah.
I think the other, I guess, kind of going back to the other interesting thing from this episode that's worth mentioning is the immunity challenge, which ultimately went to Rachel, and because Kyle didn't win it, it resulted in Kyle going home. And it was a Survivor Classic. It's called A Bit Tipsy. It's the balancing blocks to spell the word immunity. It has been done a bunch of times. It was done in Blood versus Water. It was done in Koa Wrong. It's been done. It was done in.
It's been done in the new era.
In the new era. It was done in 42 because Tori won it. So it's been done plenty of times. One thing that was really interesting about this and Kyle not winning it, and was, I think, very impactful, was that this is the first episode that Kyle has not won a challenge the entire season, because he has, in every episode, he has either won tribal immunity, individual immunity, or a reward. Or, sorry, first time since episode 2.
I was about to say, they voted TK out.
Yeah, so episode 2, they didn't win that challenge. First time since that. Because episode 1, 3, 4, and 5, they won immunity. Then he won individual immunity in 6, 7, 8, and 10. And then he won a reward in episode 9. So he was on a bit of a tear since episode 2, which is very impressive. And the second he lost, he was out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Some other interesting stats, because I don't really know what else we want to talk about from this episode, because we really want to talk about this
I was
week.
going to say, I just want to talk about this week's episode.
So I've got a few other stats that I'll list off. Kyle is the 9th player in Survivor history to be voted out 6-1-1. So that's pretty interesting.
Okay.
And the only post-merge players with this count were Joe in Cambodia and Kyle. So
he's in good company.
Yeah, and considering his challenge dominance and such, it
makes sense.
It makes sense. So, and both of them had 4 individual immunity wins before their elimination, which is kind of funny. So he also, some records that he set: most challenge wins in a New Era season with 12, if you count all of them. He is the first voted out on a day 20 since David versus Goliath, which is such a random Survivor stat.
Okay.
Since David versus Goliath, someone hasn't been voted out on day 20, which is so oddly specific.
Well, I mean, I guess before this, it was always on multiples of 3.
Yeah, and this season, I guess it
was offset because they didn't do a double tribal stuff, shenanigans, and that stuff.
And then he was also the last man that is not a part of GATA to be removed from the game. The only men that remain in the game are a part of GATA, which I think is the other interesting thing that you don't really think about. But men from the other tribes have all been eliminated now at this point.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. That is true.
Mm-hmm. So this week, I guess, where do we start this week?
Overall impressions of the episode, I guess.
We've already kind of talked about it.
Yeah.
You said this off podcast, but I think we should go ahead and put it on the record. What did you think of this episode and how it stacks up with the rest of the season?
I mean, I'm trying not to exaggerate, but this honestly was the most fun, exciting, twist-ending episode of the New Era. Like, it was legit probably my favorite episode of the New Era so far. I don't know a tribal council in the New Era, or not New Area, New Era, where, like, my jaw was on the floor seeing those votes being read.
I'm trying to remember. There were a few last season.
Last season did have some really good ones.
There was a live tribal last season that was... We had an episode called The Dumbest Tribal Council Ever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even remember what happened that tribal council, but I remember us leaving it just thinking that was ridiculous. And it was in the middle of a bunch of tribals that were crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But none of the votes truly felt like this, where there were 3 or 4 possible outcomes, and we didn't know what was going to happen until the final vote was read.
Mm-hmm. And I also just think, like, a lot of episodes, like in 46, felt fun and good and exciting because they were chaotic. This episode didn't feel like a fun episode because it was chaotic. It felt fun because it was Survivor.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like I was watching good old-fashioned Survivor strategy. This episode had it all. It had the trash talking.
Yeah, bitter
players.
Mm-hmm.
A crazy idea. No shot in the dark. Every player had their vote. No votes were blocked. And someone had an insane idea that actually worked. And, like, I don't even know how to, like, just put it into words, but it just felt like I was watching Survivor again. It really did.
Yeah, I'll also add to the comparison between this season's tribal, I guess specifically tonight's tribal and the crazy tribal councils of last season. While I agree that the chaos was part of what elevated those, I also think it was the personalities.
Mm-hmm.
Season 46 had some of the most memorable and magnetic personalities that I think we've had on Survivor in a long time.
Oh, yeah.
In a cast together. that and 40, like season 46 and 45 are just so good in terms of their cast. But I think like 46 was, especially post merge, that was such a good group. This season doesn't really have personalities like that. And we've talked about this a few times where there's no one here that we feel strong connection to in the same way that we did in 46 and 45. But there is, every now and then, there come these moments of just really vintage Survivor gameplay that, in spite of the lack of like really deep character, it makes it feel incredibly interesting. It really is just like riveting television.
Yeah.
And I think like old Survivor, like back in the day, I mean, the characters were, I mean, they weren't like, I didn't have an emotional connection to most of the players in the early seasons. There were some players that I cared about a lot. They tended to go pretty early because they built up a huge personality and then they were gone because people usually didn't like them. And that's kind of the way Survivor was, is the players that made it a long way, they got along with each other and they weren't that interesting to watch on TV. That's just kind of how old Survivor was. So it feels a little bit more like old Survivor in that they just feel kind of like normal people. It doesn't feel like they're larger than life. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
They're not all Rome. There's only one Rome out there, and he's gone now.
Yeah. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed tonight's episode. Like, whenever the votes were being read, I was just like in pure, like I was entranced with the TV. And that just doesn't happen as much anymore, where I feel like truly captivated. But yeah, this episode was really something special. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think something that was really cool, and I guess we'll probably get to it in a minute more, but just the editing of this episode was really unique, and it's something that we've seen throughout this season. It feels like they have decided to just be a lot more experimental in their editing across the board. Like, they've been using flashbacks way more than they used to, which I don't really like the flashbacks that much, but it goes to kind of show that they are trying new things. But the way that this episode was presented in a very Ocean's 11 or Mission Impossible-esque sort of way, where like they're pulling off, literally like they're pulling off a heist, and they got this music playing throughout, and they're explaining the plan, and then we're watching them execute the plan at the same time, and then something goes wrong, and now they have to pivot, but they already planned this, and we get a flashback, and it felt like a movie in the way it was going down. It felt scripted, but the whole time you're thinking, there's no way this is gonna work. They always played it up as being,
I was about to say,
a little silly and not possible, even though they knew it happened.
Yeah. It during the entire episode, it felt like, oh, this is just, they can't just have the episode be, well, it's going to be Samu or Genevieve. That's kind of it. They have to have some pushback and counter to that to make it interesting to watch, because if they're only showing, oh, it's Sam or Genevieve, that's not interesting television. They have to show an alternate route, even though it doesn't happen. They always show the two sides. And so it just felt like, oh, I mean, I guess they're showing this other side because they got to show what Sam and Genevieve are at least going to attempt. But the whole time I was like, there's truly no way this could happen, because there are so many ways that it can go wrong, and legit one singular way that it goes right. So that was my perspective the whole time. I was like, there's just no way it works.
Yeah, it's like in Avengers Infinity War, when Doctor Strange, he's like, there's only one way, you know, that moment.
Yeah.
It's like that. There's only one path.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I really respected about the editing, well, I guess while we're talking about it, and it's kind of like what I talked about, was the way that they presented it as being impossible, because they knew it was possible and they knew that it happened. And so they could have, in very minor tweaks to the edit and the way they presented it, it could have felt inevitable. It could have felt like oh, this plan is totally going to happen. And we could have known that Caroline was going to go home, but they didn't. They wanted us to feel like we were among the players, and no one there knew who was going home. No one a part of any plan knew what the outcome was going to be. And so it would be unfair for us to know what the outcome is going to be as well. And so they edited it in such a way that until that final vote is revealed, we know just as much as the players do. I mean, we know more than any one player, but we know just as much as the collective, in that until that final vote is revealed, it is totally up in the air.
Yeah.
And I really respected that. And I thought that it was done very, very well.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can rant more about the epic play at Final Tribal, but I kind of want to dissect some of the earlier things that happened in the episode. And the first thing I kind of want to jump to is Sam's pick at the reward challenge.
That was where I wanted to go, because I have a few questions I wanted to ask you about this, but I was curious. But before that, is there anything specific that you wanted to talk about?
Not necessarily, no. I think we can jump right into that.
Cool. So the idea before getting into just like Sam's specific pick, zooming out, Jeff reveals that the challenge, part of the reward is going to be letters from home.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about the letters from home in the new era now being revealed after the reward has been won, instead of being told before the challenge?
I honestly didn't really think about it, but I think they just do it to honestly probably create the wedge that it's going to cause, because if you go into the challenge knowing that it's for family letters, then if it's sprung right on the person, the emotions are much more raw. So I think they most definitely do that in order to piss people off even more.
I think absolutely, yeah.
So I kind of wish they didn't do that, just because I don't think they need to artificially enhance chaos into the game any more than they already do, in a sense. I think it's unnecessary.
I ask it because I think they do it 100% on purpose, because they want someone to be making that decision in the moment, right? They want it to be split second. Who are you going to choose? And then they have to deal with the consequences, instead of everybody having time to process that realistically they're probably not going to see those letters. If they're not in the lead, they're probably already coping with the idea that they're not going to see them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they have to cope with that decision in the moment as it's being made later, the way that it currently happens. My thought on it all, too, is if I was in Survivor and they said this reward is letters from home, I don't know how hard I would be playing the challenge. I guess I wouldn't know until I'm out there, like if I really, really want the letters. But
because you don't want the target on your back of not picking people?
I don't want all the drama that comes with letters.
And it's also like, yeah, the letters from home, it's nice to have them, but they're only out there for 6 more days.
It mattered a lot more in the 39 day.
Yeah, I love all the people, like if I was on Survivor, I love dearly all the people who I would get a letter from, but I could go 6 more days without reading them if it meant having a better position in the tribe.
I would rather $1 million than reading a letter from a loved one, because I can go a month without seeing my family. I love my family. I routinely go long amounts of time without seeing them. That just happens. That's life. And sure, it's different for someone with children. Like, I can understand that we're coming at it from a spot of being
early 20s single men.
We don't have kids, right? My cat can't write me a letter, so I don't know what I have. I would be going at it from that position. I understand that there's emotion involved from players, and it's very different, and they feel like it's going to give them that drive to keep going. I wouldn't want the target on my back. I feel like I would have I would rather save my energy in the challenge, right? I'm not going to go super duper hard, waste all my energy on that. I'm going to save it for the immunity challenge. You've got a good shot at someone picking you. Honestly, I feel like you have a better shot at being picked to go than winning the challenge. So your odds are pretty good there. I think that's probably why they reveal it later, is so it doesn't impact the challenge itself. Is so they're playing the challenge as if it's just a normal reward challenge, and then they throw it in there later. Moving on, though, to ask a more pointed question. If you were Sam, and you were in Sam's position, and you've played Sam's game, right? So you're Sam. What 2 players do you choose?
If I had made the promise to Andy, I think I would have picked Andy, just because if I had made a promise, I would have kept it. Then, honestly, I don't know. It's so tough because I think you can go one of 2 ways. You can go the route of picking Genevieve because you're like, we're both in this together. Like, let's stick together. Screw the other people who already want us out. They have very clearly made it a point that they don't want to work with us. So screw them. Why should they get a reward? Like, let's just go on this reward together. Or do I leave Genevieve out and try and pull someone in who I may be able to build something with? But then you're running the gamble of, do they think I'm just trying to wine and dine them? And then me bringing them was pointless when I could have just brought Genevieve and it would have been more impactful. So honestly, I don't think Sam made that bad of a decision. And when you're
clearly it worked.
Yeah, clearly. But honestly, I think when you're in that position, legit the only way you don't piss someone off is if you pick 2 people and then you go, and I'm going to pick you and you're going to take my spot. Like, that's the only way I think.
Are you even allowed to do that though?
I don't
think Jeff allows it.
I'm just saying, like, if that's an option, like, nothing, there's no right way to go about this because
and
someone's
even if you
going
do that,
to be pissed.
The one person who's left out is going to be upset. That's just the way it's going to work. Or the 2 people that are left. Like, there's always going to be, you're never going to please everyone.
Yeah. So honestly,
it's an impossible position.
Yeah. Honestly, I would probably be in the same boat as you, where if I'm in like final 8, final 7, and I'm at a reward challenge, and even though they haven't said there's letters from home, I would be a little bit scared about winning it.
I would definitely be hesitant, but then again, food is food. Staying the night somewhere, getting a good night's sleep. I mean, just the reward itself is really worth it. If they're going to throw in the letters, like, it's tough. If you don't know about it beforehand, I think that gives you a bit of an out. You're like, I didn't know when I won. Like, I might not have gone as hard for this challenge.
Yeah.
Like, you could maybe say that. If I was Sam, I think if we ignore the fact that their crazy Operation Italy worked, I wrote down in the moment who I would have picked. So going back to my headspace during the episode, I would have picked Andy, regardless of the promise. I think Andy is the best pick for him because he has a prior established relationship with him. That's the easiest bridge to rebuild.
And I think he's most obviously on the outside of the core alliance.
Yes. And Andy is the easiest person in the world to flip. He's flip-flopped so many times, I don't even know how many. I can't even count them. He flip-flops like it's nobody's business. That, I think, is going to be really the reason why he can't win the game, is because I think he makes it to the final 3, and the jury's going to grill him for that. They made a point to show Saul tonight saying, that was Andy. Andy flipped again. Right after the vote happened. And him saying it like that, like Andy flipped again, it wasn't like Andy made a move, or that was Andy's move, Andy's play. It was just Andy flipped. Like, I think they see him kind of as a snake. Aside from that, though, Andy, I think, is the obvious pick. Then I go Sue. I would always pick Sue here because, one, you get an easy out. She's a mom. Great out. Everybody knows Sue's a mom. She needs that letter. Gonna fight with that. Also, Caroline can't fight that because Sue's her BFF. So now you've got another person on your side. Everybody kind of loves Sue. Like how are they gonna? They can't get that upset at Sue. And if I'm looking at the people over there, who am I most likely to sway? Like, I don't think you're swaying any of them, but if you were going to maybe sway someone, you would probably want it to be Sue, because if you can sway Sue, that means you probably sway Caroline with her. Because it's a 2-for-1 deal. And so I don't think you're swaying anyone, but it's like if you're going Hail Mary trying to sway someone, trying to wine and dine someone, it's 2-for-1 with Sue, and you're going to have an easier time wining and dining Sue with those letters than you would wining and dining Caroline. So in my head, you take Andy, you take Sue, and maybe you have an outside shot at the very least, you get past this next vote, and maybe you win some good favor with them where they want to keep you around a little bit longer. Who knows what happens? I think Sue would really appreciate, like, I think that would have gone a really long way with Sue, just knowing the kind of person she is. I think she would have, like, the letters would have meant a lot. She wouldn't have cared so much about the wining and dining, but the letters, I think, would have meant a lot if he played it right.
Yeah.
But clearly it didn't matter, because they cook up Operation Italy and they go to the races and it's executed to perfection, almost, because Rachel wins individual immunity for the second time in a row.
Yes. But I want to talk about Teeny's reaction to Sam's pick, because I personally, like, I understand why Teeny is upset. I do, because Teeny's reason is, oh, why would you not pick me? Like, why would you not try and pick someone that you, like, would want to try and sway? But in my opinion, if I'm Sam, Teeny is so locked into that alliance, you're not getting any wiggle room with Sam or with Teeny at all. From Sam's perspective, I feel like Teeny is not gonna budge at all. And also, Teeny, like, was like, you, like, Sam basically, like, was like, my game's over, I'm, like, quitting the game, by picking Genevieve, and saying things along the lines of, like, they're so clearly painting themselves as a pair. They're not painting themselves as a pair. Y'all put them on the outside. What else are they supposed to? You made them
a pair.
What else are you? What are they supposed to do? Go against each other? No, obviously they're going to band together if they're on the bottom together. So I don't know why you're getting mad at them for being a pair when you basically forced them to be a pair.
Yeah, Teeny was just bitter, upset, missing out on the meal.
I mean, it was great to watch. I loved it, but it was like, I was just like, where are you coming from?
It was so old school Survivor in the best way of just being so hungry. It was giving Applebee's.
Yes. Not as dramatic.
Yes. Not in the exact same way, but it was giving the Applebee's moment from last season.
I see you eat every day.
Yeah. Just very, I mean, literally the same sort of thing, just upset that they weren't picked, and then kind of went on this rant, not to Sam's face, but to everybody else.
And like pulling outside of Survivor, like he was probably the popular guy in high school and was like the quarterback and like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, clearly Teeny has has issues with other people that are now being projected onto Sam. That I think it's clear Teeny never got to know Sam, because what I've seen from Sam on like Twitter, Sam does not seem like that guy at all. He's just relatively fit and attractive white guy. Like that's kind of it.
Who works in sports.
He does work in sport. Like he likes sports.
But like
we'll give him that.
He tweeted
he's a Swiftie, right? Like,
well, he posted an Instagram post of like him wearing the jacket with a quote of lyrics from Cardigan, the song Cardigan by Taylor Swift. And then he also tweeted something along the lines of like waking up, playing Gracie Abrams and drinking black coffee. And so it's like no popular guy from high school is listening to Gracie Abrams. I can testify. I listen to Gracie Abrams. So, like,
yeah, it's definitely projection on Teeny's part. And I just think Teeny's just trying to find someone to hate on, and it's right now it's Sam.
I also think it's funny that this is the second time that an all women's thing has been mentioned, and then a woman goes home
from that group specifically and immediately.
Yes.
And I knew the second they were all women's were going, I was like, all right, which one of them's going home?
I would love for a women's Final Four. Oh, you're gone.
Yeah, it's just that's kind of always the way it works in Survivor. It's just the great irony of Survivor. Moving on past that, if you're all right with it, would be the immunity challenge, where, I mean, Rachel kind of just like wins in dominant fashion.
Looking back though, and Sam tweeted it. Do you think Sam and Genevieve mildly threw?
Oh yeah, 100%. I don't think they were. I don't think they were trying to win.
You think that they were that confident that their plan would work, that they were willing to risk winning individual immunity?
I think they were trying, but I don't think that they were. It's a hard line to walk because
my thing is if they win individual immunity, obviously they can't do the plan, and for sure the other one is going home.
Yeah, they're immediately screwing the other person.
And then they have no other path forward except to keep winning individual immunity.
It's the sort of thing where they have to
gamble.
If they win that week, they're next on the chopping block until final 3. That's the way it's going to work, is that they are. That's just they have no other path forward. And so I don't think they were outright throwing. I do think that they're still trying. Like, if they would have happened to get it, great. You know, they have secured, like, you're not going to deny yourself the opportunity to make it another day in the game. If you get immunity, you take immunity. But I do think maybe the way you put it was mildly throwing. Maybe that's a good way to put it, where I think they were running at 75%, where they don't want to win. Like, they don't really want to win, because their best way to actually make it multiple weeks forward is Operation. Like, they're so far on the bottom that winning this week doesn't actually help them advance seriously in the game.
Yeah, I agree. They had to lose.
It's the only way it worked.
And it's risky, and it paid off.
It is. And that's one of the really great things about Survivor, is it is a game of risks and rewards.
It's a game of calculated risks.
Yes. But this is one of those times where it is it's executed perfectly, and production isn't inserting themselves, injecting risk and injecting reward. It's just the game itself playing out.
And you know what? Also, I watched this episode with Brandon. So I was watching this episode with my friend. And I was talking to him. I do not think this plan would even have been conceptualized if the shots in the dark were still in the game.
Oh, no. Absolutely not. It probably would have never been conceived. If the shot in the darks were still in the game, I don't even know how drastically different this final 6 would look right now. Because you have to rethink through every tribal going up to this point as well, and how they all play out, and calculate that into where we're at now. Nothing is the same.
Yeah.
And I have a really hard time imagining Jeff and the other producers seeing this go down and then immediately turning around and being like, all right, shot in the dark, run it back.
Mm-hmm.
I know that shot in the dark's going to be in 48, because they filmed 47 and 48 back to back, and I just don't see any way they throw that out mid film cycle. But I'm hoping and praying that there's good enough reception to this season and the way, like, especially maybe this move and some of the other moves that have been made with the shot in the dark being out, that they decide we don't need the shot in the dark anymore.
Yeah. Like this I truly hope that Jeff sees that this move is directly a result of the shots in the dark not being in the game anymore. And I really hope that Jeff sees that having the shot in the dark severely reduces creative gameplay.
And it's so funny because they think it's the opposite. And it makes sense on the surface to think that it would have the opposite effect. That having the shot in the dark, it creates more risk that, anyone could be safe. But that's not how people play it. People are always going to play the game scared. And because of that, people, when they think someone might play their shot in the dark, they're always going to when they play scared, they play safe. And when they play safe, they play predictable. And predictable play is boring. And so that's what leads to last season, where it's blindside, 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 like all the votes going on one person. And you get out a lot of idols and all this sort of stuff. And sure, blindsides are fun, but blindsides aren't interesting when you know who's going home as the viewer. It's far more I would much rather watch an episode every week where 3 players are getting votes. I think that is way more fun than all the votes being dogpiled on one person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe we're in the minority on that, but
I feel like we're not. I
don't think we are either.
I see most people on Twitter and Instagram or on TikTok who are in the Survivor community talking about how they're very happy that the shot in the darks got taken away. So yeah, I really hope Jeff takes it to heart, and I hope that it's mentioned. Like, I hope that Charlie mentions it on Fire, that this move is a result of the shots in the dark not being in the game, because it so clearly is. Because Sam and Genevieve would be so paranoid, and would probably one of them would, I feel like, would have played their shot in the dark tonight.
Oh, I think they both would have. I think they both would have taken their 1 in 6 shot, because I don't think either of them know who's going home. Like neither of them are going to know. The plan is never devised by Andy. Andy has to stick with the majority.
Yeah.
They're all going to put their votes on. You put all your vote on one vote on the other, and you just...
I understand why they put it in, but we're clearly seeing that Survivor works better without it. And so when Survivor works better without it, it's okay to say, hey, this wasn't a good idea. Let's take it out. That's okay.
And I think we have 20 years of history that says Survivor works better without it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have now...
And now we have proof.
Proof of a new era season with it working without it as well.
And it took 2 episodes to prove that.
Yeah, it really is epic that we don't have it right now. I'm not holding my breath for it to stay this way, but I'm hoping and praying to Jeff Probst that it does. We've already talked about this whole Operation Italy a lot, but at the end of the day, the majority decides to split the vote, and Operation Italy is a success. They choose Caroline as their target. How do you feel about that? Obviously, we are outside of the game, and we know more than everyone else. If they knew what we knew, they'd probably pick Sue. Mm-hmm. But knowing not that, do you think that they made the right choice, or would you have picked someone else?
Honestly, I think knowing what they know, I think Caroline is the biggest threat. And Sue is basically a sitting duck without Caroline. She just doesn't know what to do. She doesn't have her own game. If she gets to final tribal, I think her only vote would be Caroline. And she would just vote for her because she was her number one. But Sue has not controlled any votes or made any moves. She has found an idol, but that's not consequential. So, in my opinion, it makes the most sense to get rid of Caroline because I think she, after Rachel, is potentially the biggest threat. I think it's a debate between her and Teeny, but I think Caroline is the right move because when you take out Caroline, you weaken Sue. And
I think it had to have been one of those two because of them being such a clear duo.
Yeah. So I think it makes the most sense.
I agree. I think knowing what we know, obviously Sue makes the most sense because we know that Sue has an idol, but Caroline clearly has played the better game than Sue. And yeah, I agree with everything you said. Caroline has played her own game. Sue, it doesn't feel like she's played her own game since the merge.
Mm-hmm.
And even before the merge, she wasn't really playing her own game, but definitely since the merge has not played her own game. And since Gabe left, it's like she's been totally lost. And it's kind of sad because I feel like if she had played a relatively decent game, I think she's well liked enough that she could get votes. She just doesn't have a compelling case that if she made it to final tribal, she would be getting 0 votes.
Yeah, I don't even know what she would say that her moves were.
She has to use her idol. She has to make a move with her idol. That's what she's banking on. And I don't know. I guess she's banking on using it at Final 5. That's got to be her plan, is to surprise everyone with that because no one knows about it but Caroline.
It's crazy how long she's had it.
Yeah, she's had it the whole game. And I mean, it will, like, if she plays it, makes it to Final 4, and then can win Fire, for example, gets into Final 3, she could get votes. I don't think I still don't see a world where she wins unless her competition is,
and she still has a 0 bomb.
Yeah, I don't know. Her competition would have to be Teeny and Sam.
I think Sam beats Sue.
I agree, but I'm saying she'd be most competitive against Sam because she doesn't beat Rachel, she doesn't beat Andy, and she doesn't beat Genevieve. So that's what I'm saying. Like, process of elimination, the only chance she has is Teeny and Sam, I think. So, I don't know. I think they made the right move going after Caroline because Caroline was the only one who was sort of a threat. But
yeah,
I kind of feel like neither of them are much of a threat. Speaking of threats,
yeah,
you want to talk about our power rankings for
now
this week?
We're in the top 6, so we'll just rank them all.
Yep, we just rank all 6.
So I would imagine we both have the same number 1 spot.
Yeah. Well, so here's where we got to do some critical thinking because now I think we're predicting the order they go.
Yes.
So what I need to think through here.
Well, I mean, I know who my number 1 is.
I feel like number 1 should be Rachel.
Yes.
Like, that's what my brain says. But what I want to mention is that she just won her second individual immunity in a row. And so...
And I know, and I will say...
a target on her back.
And I will say, they were talking about her in the next episode. And Teeny was telling Sam and Genevieve that Rachel has a block vote.
Yes. And Genevieve has been after Rachel forever. So it's one of those things where it's like Rachel has been mentioned by people as being the biggest threat in the game since the merge. And so that to me either screams winner or voted out at 5. I don't think there's any in between.
Well, she's not getting voted out at 5. She has her idol. Unless she has to play it next episode.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that I think there's a world where she has to play it next week. And then she doesn't win individual immunity at 5 or something. Like I could see her going out at 5 or 6. So that's the kind of the one caveat that I want to throw out there, is that I think there's an equally likely world where she just kind of is viewed as such a threat, kind of like Genevieve was at her height.
I think it depends. I think it's really going to come down to if Teeny and Sue can see through their anger and frustration about what happened to see Rachel as a threat or not. Or if they're going to let their anger and frustration get the better of them and stay with Rachel and get one of them out. Because right now, Andy, Sam, and Genevieve are powerless, because next vote, Rachel can still very easily have the numbers with her block a vote. So as long as Teeny and Sue stay with Rachel and they have their 3, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So in my personal opinion, I would still put Rachel at number 1, because I think it's more likely that Teeny and Sue stay with Rachel and Rachel uses her block a vote and they get one of those 3 out.
I agree. I think so. The order that I currently have down, and we can discuss it. So I have Rachel I have Genevieve going out at 6.
I would say she's the most likely next boot. Yes,
they've been talking about that forever. The only thing that could throw a wrench in that is that for some reason Teeny really wants Sam out. Really, really wants Sam out.
Well, I mean, Sam was the plan tonight.
I know. That's what I'm saying, is that it's like Sam. But I think more people want Genevieve. And honestly, I just don't think Sam is a threat to win.
Something I was going to say, and if we had a dedicated episode last week, I don't see Sam as a threat. Yeah. I don't know what pushed Sam to the bottom other than him not having like a strong alliance with anyone. And so people on Survivor Twitter were agreeing with me and saying the same thing, like last week. He's not a threat to win. He doesn't have any super strong alliances. His only guaranteed vote is Sierra on the jury.
He was a threat when he was the duo with Sierra. And it's like people have kept that same perception. They're still viewing him as Sam and Sierra, like the power couple threat, like that threat level. But he's not that player right now. Like, he's just Sam on the bottom with no relationships, no allies, no nothing. Like, I don't see Sam getting votes. I don't see Sam as a physical threat. I don't see Sam, maybe that's his case at the end, but that doesn't work.
He hasn't led,
didn't get votes. Like, he could just be Jake.
Yeah, he has not led a single post-merge vote. He has just gone with the flow of every single vote. And then even this move isn't his.
Yeah, Sandy's. So I don't see Sam as a threat. And I have a feeling that some people have to eventually realize that.
I think right now, Sam is a final tribal council loser.
I agree. I have him in. So I have Genevieve going at 6. Then I have Teeny at 5. Because Sue plays her idol, Rachel plays her idol, and then one of Andy or Sam, maybe they win immunity. I think somehow it results in Teeny leaving. Sue can't be the one going at 5 because Sue has an idol, is what I'm saying. Then I think Sue and Sam do fire, and I think Sam beats Sue at fire. And so then I have Sam, Andy, and Rachel, 3 gotta at final tribal.
See, I don't think that happens. I think Andy is taken out before final tribal.
He could be.
I would see Andy going at 5 before Teeny.
I could see a world where it's Andy at 5, but I kind of also just think like a final gotta 3.
I mean, that would be so iconic. I would be so here for it.
It feels very poetic, and the votes, the way votes
I think the
would
votes
shake
would be
out
very
would be
spread.
So weird.
I think
because the only Gata there is Sierra, and she's going to vote for Sam. So then everybody else, I don't know how they're going to vote because they're not aligned with Andy. They're not aligned with any of them except Rachel. And
I think
so
that
Rachel
could be a
probably
tribal.
just gets the votes.
I think that could be a tribal where 3 people actually get votes, and it's not a 2. Like
Andy, I think Andy could straight up just not get votes. I think Rachel gets all of them, but 1 going to Sam. Andy probably gets 0.
Yeah,
unless Andy might make a really good case and get some because this whole move. So Andy could get Genevieve's vote. Also, Sam could get Genevieve's vote. Like, it could be a really compelling final tribal.
Genevieve said that she's going to vote for Sam if Sam is there.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, they said that. So that's 2 votes for Sam, no matter what, I guess. But I think no matter what, I at this point I can't see Andy winning because I think everyone on the jury sees him as a snake.
I was going to say they see him as a flip-flopper.
And Sierra has been sowing those seeds at Ponderosa the entire time because she saw herself going home as Andy's fault, Andy flipping on her, and Andy was a snake. He did this. He put me here. And then anyone else who went home because Andy flipped, Andy's a snake. Andy did it. Andy's a snake.
Sierra could be campaigning really hard for Sam.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be enough to flip Sam into a winner, but enough to take votes from someone else potentially.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think Andy is the one that I'm least confident now in being in that 3. But I don't feel like at this point in the game, I don't feel like Teeny's edit is compelling enough for her to be for me to like put her in the final 3.
Yeah, I think she had a lot of steam going into the merge, and early merge, her edit was really strong, but I think her edit has definitely fallen off here in the last week or 2.
Post Saul's boot.
Yes.
Teeny has hit what feels kind of like rock bottom for their edit, and it's just kind of non-existent at this point, other than now hating Sam out of nowhere, even though I thought Teeny's vendetta was against Genevieve, but it seems to have now moved. So I don't really know where Teeny stands on any of this. I guess there's a world where, maybe Sue beats someone in fire and makes it in and gets no votes. Like, whoever the no vote getter, I think could be interesting. But I kind of think Sam has a good shot at making it in. Regardless, though, I think Rachel's kind of the favorite. I just don't know how things are going to shake up. And I'm excited that we have 2 weeks to explore this.
I honestly don't know how they're going to shake down. But I will say, I think because of this episode, it makes a lot more sense why we're getting more time devoted to the finale. Because I think that this episode complicates things a lot.
Yeah, it opens the door for, like, obviously we think Rachel's front runner and Andy's had a really strong season. But I think it opens the door for her if she's able to build some momentum and go on a run. Maybe Sam is the new target, and you flip Sam and Genevieve makes it to final 3. And if Genevieve's there, Genevieve has a heck of a case to win. So if you flipped Genevieve and Sam, said Sam goes at 6, Genevieve makes it into final 3, I think Genevieve is competitive with anyone that's there, which is why I don't think she's going to make it there. But I think she has a really compelling narrative in terms of the game she's played. She just doesn't have the relationships, which hurts you in the new era. But she's already started making her case as to why she doesn't have the relationships and kind of gotten ahead of that, like at this most recent tribal. Yeah. So it almost feels like she's working the jury a little bit on that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It opens the door where I think anyone can win but Sue. And 50-50 on Teeny. Like, Teeny would have to have a really, really strong next episode.
Mm-hmm.
Just like unridiculously strong. I'd put Teeny and Sue at 0% chance of winning. Teeny at 2 or 3% chance of winning.
Yeah.
The rest of them, I think, actually have a relatively decent shot. And that's pretty exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas last year at this point, it was kind of, we felt like it was
Kenzie or Charlie.
A three. Well, at this point, it was a 3-way race.
Depending on what Maria happened to Maria.
We didn't know what was going to go on there, and then it was 50-50.
Yeah, we knew if Maria made it to Final 3, she was winning, and then it was 50-50 between Kinsey and Charlie.
Pretty exciting. I am excited to see what the aftermath of Operation Italy is, and I am eager to listen to On Fire and see if Jeb Probst has anything to say about the way it all played out. I don't think he will in regards to the shot in the dark, but
because to be honest, I don't think he realized that this was a result of the shot in the dark. But
I don't know. I guess we'll find out in season 49.
Yeah,
and when we see if it comes back, because pretty sure it'll be back next year.
Yeah. Well, with that, we will wrap up our recap episode of Survivor 47, episode 12, Operation Italy. Thank you so much for listening. You can catch us wherever you listen to podcasts, on Spotify, Apple Music, all that stuff. And if you enjoyed this episode, we would really appreciate a rating/review. And make sure to check us out on social media at Idle Talk Podcast. We will catch you in the next one.